A citizen's beatdown in Hollywood after a group of people say they witnessed a man abusing a small dog on a leash.
What the you doing?
I pulled over and started chasing him.
And why is that?
Because that's absolutely not okay.
The people who beat the man for nearly a minute and held him down until police arrived say they were conducting a citizen's arrest.
Although he started running, we chased him. And he's talking about the dog disrespecting him, dragging him and just kicking him up, slamming him right here.
Now, I'm against violence in principle, unless it's in self-defense. But self-defense, in my opinion, extends to the defenseless, to protecting those who can't protect themselves. And obviously that applies in this case. They maybe hit the dog abuser a few more times than they had to, but who's counting? Not a jury, apparently, because the police are not pressing charges against people who rescued the dog. They did arrest the abuser for animal cruelty. And my question to everybody who agrees with that outcome is this: what are you having for dinner today? Or rather, who are you having for dinner? And I'm not asking you that to make you feel bad or guilty. The reason I'm making this video is to bring you the good news that you can keep eating meat without eating animals. The only difference between what happened to this dog and what happens to the animals who are caged in our food system and slaughtered to fill our supermarkets and restaurants is that what happened to that dog happened in broad daylight, outside in West Hollywood or wherever it was. Whereas what happens in slaughterhouses very deliberately happens behind closed doors. And politicians who are tools of the animal murder industry are even trying to criminalize filming inside the slaughterhouse, filming, documenting inside what occurs to animals, instead of actually doing something about animal cruelty.
Yeah, It's a little much.
We showed the video to LA criminal law attorney Andrew Leventhal. He says the altercation leading up to the rescuing of the dog is probably fair, but continuing to beat the man even after the dog is safe raises some legal questions.
Which looks like the dog was already, being taken care of at that point. Now, so like technically, does it look like that, the prosecution could file, charges against the men, beating up the animal abuser? Yes, technically they could.
Now this part kind of drives me nuts. They're talking about pressing charges against the animal abuser, but almost everyone that you saw interviewed, 95 to 98% chance, from that lawyer to the people who rescued the dog, to the police officers, to the judge, to the jury, 95 to 98% of those people are probably animal abusers on a much larger scale than this guy who kicked the dog. Those are people who pay and demand other people to cage, mutilate, stab, shoot, and gas animals to death. I think that's fair to call that animal abuse. But while we're talking about the legal dynamic here, to those of us who believe that all animal abuse, that the murder of animals should be illegal, I think it's obviously unrealistic that we could, implement that on a national level in any country yet. I'm sure the UK could very realistically do it within the decade. But I think the first key step to doing that is outlawing the slaughter of animals in cities. That will help lay the legal framework that can eventually be scaled up to the state, provincial, federal, national level, but also in confronting the population of the city and getting this campaign out there and saying, are you against tens of thousands of animals being stabbed, shot, and like they are here in Toronto, gassed to death every single day in our slaughterhouses? Sign a petition and whatnot, come to the rally, but are you supporting that on a daily basis? I think this is one of the key ways to make those connections. We can go out there and do vegan activism, but when we make this a political issue, when we get the news media involved because we're asking for something specific, shut down the slaughterhouses, we can get people paying attention. And I'm sure the majority of people agree and they're against slaughterhouses, and that's gonna make them question their own actions. Now, some people say, but if we shut down the slaughterhouses locally, aren't they just gonna murder the animals somewhere else? Isn't that a waste of time? That's actually a very valid question. I love it when people ask me that, because the idea here is not just to make people in the city think about it and therefore drive down animal consumption on the city level amongst those who are opposed to the mass slaughter of animals right in their backyard. The goal here is to drive up the cost of animal foods, because when you shut down a slaughterhouse, it's not easy to just reopen one somewhere else. Nobody wants a slaughterhouse in their backyard in their city. It takes years. What happens in the meantime is that there's this massive backlog. Actually, there's already a backlog, so the backlog gets worse, of animals waiting for an appointment at the slaughterhouse. When farmers have to keep those animals alive longer, they have to feed them, they have to house them, that costs money. That money gets passed on to consumers. And just like we saw during the pandemic, where a lot of slaughterhouses were shut down because of outbreaks on the killing floor, when there's a backlog, when we cause supply chain issues, we drive up the cost. And when you drive up the cost, there is irrefutable evidence that consumption goes down. So mass animal abuse goes down. So that's what we're trying to do. Generally with inflation, it's bad. We want people to be able to afford things, but eating animals is murdering us. It's the #1 cause of heart disease, which is the #1 killer in the Western world, leading cause of cancer. It's causing climate destruction, and of course, it's causing animal abuse. So I think it's fair to shut it down, and plant-based foods are consistently getting cheaper. In some places, I believe it was Denmark or Holland I read recently, they've already surpassed. Plant-based meats are finally cheaper than corpse-based meats. If you want to get involved with the Slaughter Free Cities campaign, it's animalsneedrights.org. Thank you so much for listening. Live long and prosper. Vegan power.